Hello. Welcome to another episode of the From the Periphery podcast. In today's short episode, we share 3 big updates from the war in Sudan, specifically concerning the involvement and complicity of the U.A.E. as a major player. We also discuss a shocking article written by 2 Emiratis in the notorious magazine, the Jerusalem Post, which attempts to justify the U.A.E.'s role in the conflict. These developments mark a scary turning point in the war, as well as the U.A.E.'s calculations within it. Before we begin the episode, From the Periphery is a community-supported collective that relies on your support. If you like the work we do and want more of it, please check out our Patreon and consider becoming a member. The link will be in the show notes below. Your support will allow us to continue doing our work and help us grow. Thank you, and I hope you enjoy this episode. Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the From the Periphery podcast. I'm your co-host, Eamon McAdam, and with me is another FTP member, Aydin.
Hey.
Basically, today we're going to talk about 3 big updates from the war in Sudan, specifically in relation to the U.A.E.'s pretty heavy involvement, and they're pretty big developments. So, yeah, I think these are really important, actually. I don't know if you saw any of it, Aydin.
You know, I would love a rundown. Fill me in, Eamon. What do I need to know?
Well, okay, so first of all, if anyone wants to get like a more in-depth discussion of the entire war, and I think we'll do some recaps in this episode, but we do have other episodes on the FTP podcast and on TFTT, the Fire These Times, where we go more into depth with guests on Sudan. But for today, I think of the 3 stories, the one that I've seen published a bit more is related to the ICJ, the International Court of Justice, because they recently dismissed charges brought against the U.A.E. by the Sudanese government in claiming that the U.A.E. is supporting the RSF, which is the Rapid Support Forces, essentially committing genocide in the Darfur against non-Arab African communities. And I've seen that sort of published or shared, and a lot of people say this is another lack of accountability and the like. And it is bad news, objectively, but there's an important point, which is that I want to sort of clarify. The charges were dismissed, not refuted, as in they didn't look into the case. The ICJ didn't examine the evidence and found that there's no basis on this. Rather, they looked into it and found there's no jurisdiction, that the U.A.E. has some sort of carve out that the ICJ doesn't have any jurisdiction against it. And so it's just a legal bureaucratic thing that meant that it never went to court. It never actually went any further. But just the very fact that Sudan brought forth a case against the U.A.E. at the ICJ for basically aiding and abetting genocide is itself pretty fucking big. So that's the one that I saw most shared.
Do you know what the workaround was? Why the case was able to be dismissed so quickly?
So I'm not that deep into legal stuff, but everything that I can see is just what they describe as a carve out,
Okay.
that they're signatories to the Geneva Convention, but that there is a specific thing that but no Emirati can be, held accountable, that the ICJ doesn't have jurisdiction.
Cool.
So I don't know how that shit works at that level, but
Okay.
I think it's an important distinction that it's not because I think it's one of those things that people will read and be definitely the Emiratis are running with this, where it's aha, see, it was a baseless claim. But it's no, it wasn't baseless. It was just there was no foundation for the ICJ to hold, you accountable or to even look into it. So they didn't even look into it to begin with. A second story, which is I think I've seen shared second most, which is also more visual. For the last 3 days, there have been these huge attacks in Sudan, in the city of Port Sudan. Port Sudan, over the last 2 years of war, has largely remained quite peaceful. There haven't been any attacks, any battles. It is the seat of the of the government, like usually in Khartoum, but because Khartoum was taken over by the RSF, I guess I should just say very clear, very like sort of simply, that you can reduce basically the whole war between the RSF and the SAF. The RSF being the Rapid Support Forces, this militia headed by Hemeti, and the SAF, which is the Sudanese army. A lot of Sudanese commentators describe this as there are no good guys of the fighters, but the RSF are far and beyond just, committing genocide. And so anyway, for the last 3 days, every day, there have been attacks on Port Sudan. Port Sudan, which is on the Red Sea, and huge plumes of smoke and attacks on the port, And what's reported is that these were huge drone attacks, right, by the RSF against Port Sudan, the civilians, obviously, but also like as a sort of attack on the SAF, who are like the sort of official government headed by El Burhan, the head of the army. But so this is a massive escalation because they've never been attacks like this on Port Sudan. But also, it really shows, like, because my first impression seeing this is, where the fuck are they getting these weapons? That, okay, there's like a lot of arms coming and going into the country, but an attack of this size, very, very strategic, very calculated, very like technological, sophisticated drone that has these like huge impacts. And so this is another indication of the UAE's sort of supply chain funneling weapons to the RSF. And I don't think that the timing of all of this is coincidental in terms of the ICJ dropping these charges and then this attack. But there's a third one. And this third story, to me, honestly, like ties it all together and it brings it into a whole new perspective. So, do you know the Jerusalem Post?
Sure, yeah.
Like one of the worst, most Zionist piece of shit, like genocidal mags out there. There was an article written on there about 2 days ago by two dudes based in the U.A.E. One of them is Emirati. And like, Aydin, I don't know what to tell you. Like this article, I was like, one of those things where you read and it's just like jaw dropping. The title of the article is Hamas's Next Front, Sudan's Islamist Army and the African Threat to Israel.
Oh my God.
And so, yeah. And so, again, it's like here it ties it together then with other calibrations, right? And it's just bizarre. And reading through it, I was just so shocked at like, because again, what we've seen since October 7, and you know this for sure, it's just like the kind of ludicrous, we're just gonna say something and like act as though it's true.
Right.
And so, like every time the Israelis come out and say this building is Hamas, this hospital is Hamas, this medic, anything, and kind of legitimizes whatever. And so here we're seeing that exact same playbook, but used by the UAE against the Sudanese army.
Right.
And so you go a bit further down, and one line in specific really shocked me. Obviously, all of this then goes back to Iran. Again, no evidence. It does not really even fit much that the Sudanese army is being supported by Iran, especially because it's very heavily backed by like Egypt. I don't know, it's just
They're just making up stories.
they're just making up fucking stories. And so they say this one line, with Iran using Port Sudan to evade sanctions and arm extremist allies, the Red Sea is no longer just a geopolitical passage. It is becoming a battlefield. Israel cannot afford to overlook this buildup. Like, and so this, you know what I mean? Like this literally coming at the exact same time of these attacks on Port Sudan for the very first time. And these are Emiratis writing it in like a super Zionist Israeli newspaper.
Right. And what are they after with supporting the RSF?
So basically, honestly, like I describe this aspect of the war as basically like a neo-colonial war, right? But you see a lot in Dubai now. And like Dubai has been building up this image, but also like materially, as more than just oil, And so I don't know, have you seen this bullshit of like Dubai chocolate? Where the fuck are they getting the chocolate from, But also, and much more
Right.
important to the point, Dubai gold.
Uh,
They have no gold. Where are they getting this gold from?
mm,
And Sudan has a lot of gold. Sudan also, it's very rich in minerals as well, but also in things like gum arabic,
mm,
And so there is an economic interest, for sure. Sudanese commentators talk a lot about like there's also like a geopolitical thing in general, like it's access to the Red Sea and it's a bridge between like the Arabian Gulf and Africa. And I'm sure there's more to it, but I think the economic thing is the most like succinct. It's there and you can just see it. Like you see the gold going back to Dubai. And
yeah.
then you can see it on your Instagram sometimes. I get these videos where it's like, look at this cool new Dubai gold shit. And
Mm,
it's blood gold. But the UAE has also been developing its like military capabilities, its geopolitical meddling for at least like 10 years now. I remember in 2015 when the sort of like Saudi-led aggression on Yemen started, the UAE's been pretty
mm,
involved in that.
mhm.
Oftentimes actually using Sudanese mercenaries in Yemen. And then even getting to
Well,
the point where they were in conflict with the Saudis. That was like a very interesting thing that kind of like simmered down. But so it's become its own player and one of the most dangerous players in the region as it kind of strategizes, becoming more relevant outside of just being like, a petro monarchy. And yeah, and there's like a thousand other things that the Emiratis have been doing, but here in this specific case, it's like really important to note how heavily involved they are in the war in Sudan, in perpetuating the war, in funding like the worst militia and extracting, you know. The RSF also looted the like Sudanese National Museum,
mm,
and a lot of Sudanese were saying, I wouldn't be surprised if we find this pop up in the Abu Dhabi Louvre or something, or in some museum in the Emirates.
yeah, I was gonna say it seems like they're not just, you know, like meddling in the actual on the ground affairs, to put it very lightly, but also like coming in and trying to control the narrative in some ways or develop a sort of story around it, as you were saying with this article that they wrote. And yeah, just create like a more not just. I mean, I'm curious if you have clues into how much they're meddling in like internal politics in Sudan in terms of like journalism or narratives that are happening there, versus like this article that you saw in the Jerusalem Post and this international narrative.
So I don't know how much it involves in like discursively because I think the actual battle, like it's very much on the battlefield in terms of like, yeah, they don't really spend that much time with media stuff. Again,
Okay.
this article I think was shocking for me only because in things like this, and especially over the last 2 years where it's been a bit more secretive, that it's like arms smuggling or even like medical support, that they haven't engaged in a kind of media warfare. And so this article really stands out as a because now it is coming out and the Sudanese are really,
Mm,
voicing not just that like rejection, but like naming as a kind of form of accountability the UAE as
mm,
like a main funder and supporter of the RSF and reason why the war is kind of continuing. And so now I think the UAE is feeling, oh, okay, we need to create our own counter narrative.
right.
And so what I
Sure.
see sometimes now as well is that the UAE is sending humanitarian aid. And again, very, very, very Zionist talking points. You know what I mean? A
Yeah.
very similar Zionist narrative. There actually is another article that came out in Al Jazeera, written by Matt Nashid, who writes a lot about Sudan. And the title of this article, I'll put it in the show notes, How RSF is Adopting Israel's Template for Genocide in Sudan. So a few weeks ago, there was this horrible, horrible assault by the RSF on, I believe it was called the Zamzam refugee camp. displacement camp in the Darfur, which is the main area that's like experiencing genocide, and the communities there experiencing genocide. And obviously, many people know that it is the site of another genocide 20 years ago by the exact same fuckers, who back then were called the Janjaweed, and since then were kind of like legitimized by the Bashir government and became, the RSF as a kind of, it sounds more legal and legit. But so it's no longer this thing that they're just going in and killing civilians and attacking medics and journalists and the like. But now they're also coming up with these arguments, these narratives. They get away with so much of this shit that it's like, but they still do it. Anyway, they still do it. I don't know who it's for, but they attack this refugee camp and they're like, oh, because there were terrorists in here. And actually we were protecting civilians. And human shields, like these kind of arguments. Like it's not us that's killing them, it's them that's putting them in the way. And so you see that use of the narrative and the kind of media plays and some of this like human rights language being deployed for not the first time, but it is becoming more of a thing.
It's a very playbook kind of move to be able to say, well, I mean, and I think that's where my question is coming from around like, how much are they trying to control the narrative? Because it is such a, like, yeah, on the one hand, why bother? Because it's so clear and blatant what you're doing, and it's not like anybody's going to hold you accountable anyway. And on the other hand, like, this is how they get away with it, like being able to just like put out these really basic talking points, and officials in other places who might decide that they should try and hold them accountable saying, well, look, it says like they said that they're handing out, help to all these people who are suffering. So like clearly they can't be that bad, or like clearly they do care about people, or clearly they have their side of the story, and their side of the story is whatever they want it to be.
No, exactly. And like you said, it's for people on the outside and for officials and governments and whatever. But yeah, I think to your point, basically what's definitely clear, and Sudanese people have said this over and over again, like the distinction is like the RSF and then also the UAE, there's like no attempt at trying to fight for people's like what people call like, people's hearts and minds.
Mm-hmm.
Like their legitimacy that they're trying to establish is purely through bloodshed and through domination. But there's none of this, I think the RSF have created some sort of like political coalition kind of thing, but it's not actually any representative at all. And not to say that the SAF is like amazing, but it's like it's the national army, you know what I mean? Like it's part of the state and it's whatever. I don't want to get too much into that. For that side, I think people should listen to the other episodes where it's like, yeah, there's much more info, but it's also people who have much more of a kind of right to talk about these things at that level. But yeah, it's like there are these similarities in the tactics and the narratives, but then like you see an article like this, and then you see the UAE and how the UAE has really been moving towards like a partnership with the Israelis in the region.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's generally been really sad and frustrating to watch different countries in different parts of the world pull from the same playbook and get away with it, with committing genocide or warfare on their people. And it's especially jarring to see, what you're outlining here is this like not even trying to cover up what they're doing, partnership or like colonial sort of project on behalf of the UAE, coming in and just like supporting the destruction of civilian life in a country that like they have no business meddling in, and getting away with it completely in like any amount of international like accountability mechanisms that we might have, weak as they are. It's just complete impunity. And that's super dangerous. And we've already seen complete impunity happen for Israel. It really, I mean, and Syria and so many other places, obviously, but like it really sets a terrible precedent for what could follow or what's to come.
And I think for us as internationalists, there's a kind of thing that we keep saying, which is that like the states are learning from each other
Uh-huh.
and they're replicating the playbooks. And so
Right.
this article, to me, alongside the actual attacks that we've seen in Port Sudan, do mark a kind of serious escalation in the war, insofar as the UAE's involvement is concerned.
Scary.
Scary.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's all I've got for today.
Bye. Thanks for the updates.
Yeah. No, thanks
Great.
for joining and thanks for listening. And yeah, we'll see you all in the next one.
We'll see you next time.
From the Periphery is a worker-owned media collective. We focus on elevating voices, struggles, and ideas that are peripheralized and marginalized under mainstream journalism and academia. If you like the work we do and want to see more of it, please consider heading over to patreon.com and become a member today. For as little as $5 a month, you get access to exclusive content, an invitation to our monthly hangout, and to join the community that's been growing around our work. If you can't support financially, there are still a number of ways you can support us. You can leave a 5-star rating on the podcast app you're using to listen, like and subscribe if you're on YouTube, and leave a comment wherever you're listening, all of which helps us against the algorithm. Most importantly, tell your friends and family about us to help spread the word. Thank you so much for listening.